So basically, in a way, I think perhaps, I don't know if you guys are going to agree with me on this one, but when I think about dogme, when I think about working with emergent language, when I think about reactive teaching, I always tell people it's about your ability to become a much better listener.
Yes.
And asking good questions.
Mm.
Is that what you would recommend to a teacher who wants to start working with emergent language?
It's a big part of the book. We give them the reader will get a series of tasks, and the first ones are all about tuning in, and so it's telling the teacher, don't worry about what you're hearing at the moment, just hear it.
Right.
So they're doing tasks as simple as who said something interesting. Did you notice when students aren't agreeing with each other?
Interesting.
Who could you nominate to share?
Yeah.
And just say, do not worry about the errors. You know, and so just listening, because we think it's a little bit like learning a language. You've got to listen. You can't listen and respond all the time. You're kind of going, what is everyone talking about? For a long time in your learning, and I think teachers need to do that.
I think it's that thing of, just to add to that as well, you know, too much teacher talking time, as we're often told on training courses.
Except for the podcast.
Apart from the podcast, I love the name. I think that's the thing that drew me to want to do this, and it's like, great, love it. But you know, we're told that, we hear this all the time, and you know, often a reason for that is the teachers not being comfortable enough to let the students say more, or not encouraging the students to say more, and jumping in and filling the silence, which is quite natural to want to do, because it's scary when you're standing there and it's gone quiet. And we've all had that thing. I always have to tell myself to shut up.
And I think there's also a weird politeness that people have is they don't want to say to a student, what do you mean? But we don't know what they mean all the time.
Yes.
So but that outside, that's happening all the time, the frowning faces. So sort of trained myself over the years to kind of go, sorry, what are you saying? What do you mean? Because I think it's really useful.
And there's a fear, isn't there, of correcting. I've had lots of people say, and it comes from, you know, an embarrassment of a fear of embarrassing the student. But actually, you know, as soon as you, with a little bit of intensity, you take what the student said and say, good, that's interesting, let's look at it. It doesn't have to be negative at all. And that's what students are paying their money for very often. Right. It's the reason they're coming to class. They want that stretch, you know, very often. If they don't want it, they'll ignore what you've just put on the board and carry on saying what they're saying. And, you know, it's very clear, but, you know, you provided an opportunity for that to happen. And I think that's those learning opportunities we need to look for in class, and help teachers become aware of as well, because they're not always obvious when you're in the moment.
So is that how you would recommend going about quote unquote error correction in this kind of capacity? Because we, you know, teachers always ask us the same thing, like how, you know, it's a big ocean of there's no one answer, and it's an impossible question to answer in a minute, or because there's like a million research papers about error correction and this and that and the other. But as a, you know, explicit, implicit correction, but is implicit correction is just saying, hey, well, can you give me an example of what you mean, or what do you mean, or can you elaborate on that? Is that a form of elucidating, I guess, maybe not correcting, but elucidating their thoughts?
It's certainly a way of getting more data to work with, I think. Actually, you know, and
the right data to work with, because, you know, sometimes you correct. Well, I see this actually all the time on CELTAs. People correcting people, I'm thinking, I don't think that's what they're trying to say.
Right.
They're just given something that's now grammatically
just feeding them language.
And I think it was something Jeremy Harmer said years ago on a blog post. I remember reading it. It was his big criticism of when, you know, emergent language being talked about for the first time, and his criticism, I think it was, I hope, sorry Jeremy if I'm wrongly accusing you of this, but it was that, you know, teachers often give students the wrong reformulations or something like that. And you know, there is a danger of that, so you do need to check. And it's back to negotiation of meaning, the kind of negotiation of meaning that happens between learners. In this case, the interaction between teacher and learner. It's about finding out what they actually need help with.
And I mean, there's theoretical support for it. I think Ellis, isn't it, who talks about if you give someone what they need at the point they need it, it's much more durable, it's much more likely to stick. And we've been researching this for a long time. I've got about 12 hours of myself teaching, and I'm very explicit with my corrections. I don't know, I'm not stopping people speaking, but I'm kind of, sorry, what do you mean there? No, you mean, and we switch, and then the conversation gets back on track, and it doesn't ever seem to stop the flow, because there is no flow. That's what cultural communication.
Well, that's what learning a language is.
It's what learning a language is.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about emergent language, so we might as well just jump right into it. So help us, or help the audience better understand what emergent language is. So we have a working definition here.
Right. Should we open the slides? We've got a backup slide. So it's coming out of interaction. That's right. The first thing. It's not your planned language, your target language, your aims. It's produced by learners during meaning-focused interactions. So when learners are talking together, completing tasks, genuine meanings, when learners are interacting open class with teachers. So that's the emergent language. But we've kind of extended the definition and to say that it's those emergent language moments then are the moments when the teacher decides, let's do something with this. From something as simple as recasting and just correcting a bit of pronunciation like that, to dealing with an error, to dealing with a communicative breakdown.
Providing them with extensions and alternatives. Certainly you've got intermediate learners and above, like giving them a wider variety of ways to say something is a way of introducing new language, persuading them off a plateau if they're on there, or giving them more options of language to use, looking maybe different register, for example.
And also responses to questions. So at any time a student says, what does this mean? Or how do I say that's an emergent language moment? And sharing things that you've heard. So I was on a class on Zoom last year, going round the breakout rooms, and one student was just trying to explain that they were a childminder, but they weren't an au pair, and they weren't a nanny. So you're a nanny? No, I'm a childminder. Let me explain. Oh, so you're an au pair. And so the feedback is, okay, Louise, what's your job? Can you explain to everyone what's your job and what are you not? That's emergent language. So they all learn about the difference between childminder, au pair, and what was the other one I said? Nanny.
Yes,
nanny.
Because that's what they're talking about. So let's. This is interesting, learnable.
Sounds like a conversation I have with my parents pretty frequently. Like, hey, what is it you do for a living? Well, actually, it's this. Well, no.
It's a negotiation of meaning.
Don't you have to speak all their languages?
Yes.
They're only learning one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you can do this all from your basement. Well, yes, but actually,
There's you said something there, Danny, deciding to do something. How does a teacher decide to do something with the language? What is that crucial moment when a teacher knows, like, okay, now I need to do something with this?
That's what we wanted. I think that's why it's taken so long for anyone to really jump in and say, let's do a book on emergent language, because it's so big.
So we realized as we started writing, it's like there were times when we felt a little bit lost in what we were going to include in cuts, or
because those questions are so hard to answer. So we kind of went the other way about it by watching ourselves teach, by recording lessons and watching. My belief, which I didn't know existed, but it must be a belief, it's certainly a practice, was that I waited for moments of miscommunication, moments students weren't sure about what they wanted to say, or I could see other people weren't sure about what they wanted to say. So I could see that I was regularly pushing the conversation forward. Any little gap they had, I was pushing it forward, and I was ignoring articles and prepositions and ed endings, and just not really bothered about the little stuff. And so I figured to myself, right, so that's what I'm going for. So but that's not going to be everybody's belief, or it's not going to be everybody's role because of the kind of school they're working in, if they've got exams, if they've got targets. So we made a list of, I think, nine reasons that we've seen people working with emergent language. What we recommend is that teachers in the same schools, in the same context, just get together and discuss what they think are the priorities. So for me, it was language that caused miscommunication, repeated issues. If I was hearing the same thing again and again, I would deal with it. And very often dealing with intuition. I was like, oh, that's interesting.